All right, who's ready to do some GIS? Woo! Yeah. All right. It's afternoon. It's right after lunch. I've got to be a little peppy so that you guys don't fall asleep, food coma and whatnot. All right, so my name is Michelle Tobias. I am the GIS data curator here in the UC Davis Library, and this is Maptime Davis. So if I see a lot of new faces, so this is good. A little background on what Maptime Davis is. Maptime is an international concept for meetups around geospatial and mapping things. It's called Maptime because it's literally time for making maps. So we do a lot of different mapping things with Maptime Davis. It tends to be a little bit more on the academic side because we're Davis and, you know. So we have some stuff coming up. There are flyers that look like this over on the table over there if you'd like to get one. There's also a link to the schedule at spatial.ucdavis.edu, among other places, but that's the easiest one to get to. So after this, next week we have a drone show and tell, which I believe is going to be in the lobby of Kemper. Is that right? We just got confirmation on that. So if you're interested in drones, just want to see drones up close, talk about drone data, I and one other researcher will have kite aerial photography equipment. So if you want to find out how to do this old school without motors and plugs and things like that, we'll have that as well. So that's next week. So we won't be here. We'll be in Kemper in the lobby with a lot of drone things. The week after that, we have historical mapping with open source tools. So you guys are getting an intro to GIS and QGIS. So you'll be primed and ready to go in 2 weeks for historical mapping. So if you're interested in finding out how to map things with a history to it, things that have happened over time, I'm looking forward to that one. It's going to be awesome. Then after that, we've got getting started with ArcGIS Pro. So if you're interested in learning more ArcGIS type software, or you want to learn about just the wide variety of softwares that are out there, that's going to be a good one. That one's going to be in the Wixon Computer Lab, so in 1014 Wixon. That's all on this, so don't sweat it if I'm going through this too fast. So we will have computers for you, so you won't have to install anything, although if you want to bring your own and you have the software, you can do that too. After that, we've got a GIS career panel discussion. So if you're curious about the wide range of GIS careers in the world, we're going to have several people from various industries, academia, that kind of thing, to talk about what's out there for using GIS as a career. And then our last one is going to be an introduction to Python in ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS RBridge. And that one's also going to be in the Wixon Computer Lab as well because it uses Arc and we want to make sure everyone has access to the software. So that's what's coming, sorry, that's what's coming up with Maptime. I should mention Maptime is brought to you by the library, also by Center for Spatial Sciences, and the space is provided by the DSI. So it's like PBS where they're like, this is brought to you by. So that's pretty much, this takes a lot of people to make happen. It's also driven by the community. We have a lot of our presentations are community members, just people who have expertise who want to share. So if you have expertise that you would like to share, I would love to have you give a workshop. Because this really does take the entire community to do and make possible. So, all right, so is there anything I missed? Okay, spatial.ucdavis.edu is the website for Center for Spatial Sciences. Alex and I are both coordinators of that, and we have faculty involved. There's a lot of research labs who do spatial work that are involved with that as well. You can go there to find out how to get on the mailing list for the geospatial email. There's also flyers, like little slips of paper on the table over there. It also has the schedule for Maptime, so you can get that online. Drop-in hours are listed there. Those happen Wednesdays from 2 to 4 in the map room, so you can come ask questions about GIS and workflows and software and all that good stuff. And then also it says more useful stuff, like classes. We keep a list of what spatial classes are going on, where to get data, what software is available, who administers the license for Pix4D, that kind of stuff. So go check that out because there's a lot of good resources there. All right, any questions or anything I missed before we dive into GIS? The lights are going dim. All right, yeah. Oh, Alex will be your person today. Yes, and Anna, there we go. So if you're having trouble installing, like your computer's still hanging, right? So we'll, if you can talk with her and see if we can get that fixed. we will move forward. Okay, so I have helpers in the room. We've got Alex and Anna to help. Also, some of you in this room have GIS experience, I know, and maybe a little bit of QGIS experience. So I'm gonna ask, because the room is full, try to help each other. I'm tethered here because we are actually recording for the people, especially on the med campus, who can't make it all the way over here in the limited amount of time they have. So just also, I should mention this is being recorded. For those of you in the room, all it sees is the back of your heads. But if you have concerns about that, you might, you can move to the side of the room or move to the back as well. Then you won't be on the video, but mostly it's really shooting over your head at the projector. So there's that. Normally I don't like to record stuff, but this one's necessary given the audience that we have. Okay, so today we are starting from scratch with GIS. So the workshop materials that we're going to be working with today are all online. Let me make this as readable as possible. I keep my workshop materials online on GitHub, so they're available all the time. So they will not go away. Don't panic. You don't have to go save this. It will live there. I'll update it as necessary. But and up there on this board on the far side over there is the link that we're going to right now. So you're going to go to github.com/Michelle Tobias with 1 L and then /intro to GIS with QGIS. Or you can just go to github.com/Michelle Tobias and look at my repo list and find the intro to desktop GIS with QGIS, which is probably easier than typing all of that. Okay. So as I scroll down on the site, this is what we have. At the top, it looks like a bunch of computer jargon. Just scroll past that. And then we have the workshop materials. So today we're going to be working with QGIS 3. I'm going to assume you don't have any GIS experience for this. I know that some of you have experience. Some of you are here just to learn the QGIS part of this, and some of you are here because you're interested in learning just GIS, and some of you want both combination, and that's great. So I'm just going to assume no knowledge, and we'll start from there. So we've already gotten past this part. So you know we're going to be using QGIS. The plan here is to teach you just basics, so that you have enough information to start getting into GIS. This is not a replacement for taking the full intro to GIS course like LDA 150 or equivalent. It's 2 hours, so we can't cover everything. It's just going to get like dipping a toe in the pond or ocean of GIS. I've been doing this for like 20 years at this point, so I will say you can't learn this all in 2 hours. So I'm going to be demonstrating with QGIS 3.4. If you downloaded 3.6, that's fine. I don't think that there's any significant differences. If you're working on 2.18, you will see differences specifically in how to load data. That's okay. Our helpers in the room know how to do that. So if you can't translate it for yourself, let us know, we'll help. But just know I'm going to demonstrate with 3.4. So the goals of this workshop, like I said, are really to teach basic fundamentals, to just get you started so you have enough terminology and enough experience that you can go out and either learn on your own or maybe take some more classes, enough to maybe read some GIS journal articles and not feel completely lost. But again, this is not a substitute for taking a full course to learn, 10 weeks worth of stuff. I'm not magic. We can't learn a whole quarter's worth of material in 2 hours. So again, you're going to learn concepts and terminology. We're going to talk about the 2 most common data types. You will learn how to bring data into QGIS. You also learn some pretty common formats that you'll see out there in the land of GIS. You'll know about attributes for vector data by the time we're done. And we'll at least get to that point. This workshop material will be more than we can cover in the full 2 hours, but that's okay because you can continue with it on your own. You can also ask me questions later. So we'll get as far as we can on this. All right, so what is this? First, this is a lot of text, so don't try to read it. You can follow along on the website. This is just notes for me. So GIS, like this is what is QGIS. Let's talk what is GIS in general. So GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems, or Geographic Information Science, or sometimes the S gets changed to a whole bunch of different stuff. It just depends on the flavor that someone's trying to convey. But what it really boils down to is you have data that in some way has a spatial location. So I have information not only about a thing and what it is and maybe some information about that thing. The key is that I know where it exists on the planet. And then I can take other information from other places and put it all together and see it in one place. And the way that the data relates to each other is based on its location. So if any of you do databases, like the key here for your database join is location. It's not a key column. But it's really powerful that I can take data from Caltrans, I can take data from the census, I can take data from UC Davis, and I can put it all together. And as long as I have a location, it doesn't matter who produced that, it will all go together. That's huge. Most fields don't get this, right? Most fields have to join stuff based on carefully planned databases. I don't need that. I just need location. I can pull it together and I can make all kinds of analysis based on location alone. So this is a really powerful tool. And that's really what GIS does, is it is the thing that makes that location putting together possible. So what is QGIS then? Why add a Q? So it used to be, the reason it's QGIS is it used to be called Quantum GIS, and then at some point they decided to just call it QGIS. So that's where the Q comes from. I don't know why they changed it, but they did.
Trademark lawsuit.
Oh, okay, there you go, trademark lawsuit. As with many things. I was at a conference and we were joking that you've made it in the open source spatial world when you have had a takedown notice, like a legal takedown notice from somebody, because it happens all the time. All right, so QGIS specifically is, it's a GIS that is open source. It is community driven. It is programmed by people who use the software or have an interest in it. It is free and open source. So it means that it's free of cost. You can have this for free. I think all of you in this room hopefully have downloaded it and nobody charged you anything for it. But it's also open source, meaning that you can actually see under the hood. You could look at the underlying code if you wanted to. You don't have to, but you could. You can change things in the software and nobody will get upset with you. You can redistribute it and no one will get upset with you. The license is set up so that it's very open and it's available to make changes. Okay, so one other thing to mention is that QGIS is a project of the Open Source Geospatial Foundation. It's a nonprofit that runs, provides tools for communities that build this kind of software. So you'll also see, if you go to their website, you'll see QGIS is affiliated with OSGeo, but also projects like GRASS, which is a really long-running GIS program before even Esri stuff happened. GRASS was out there. And also some of the underlying software pieces like GDAL. If that makes no sense to you, don't worry. You don't need to know that. But so they kind of provide support for these kinds of projects. So just wanted to mention that so you've got the full idea of where this comes from. Also, why QGIS? How many of you have worked with like ArcGIS software before? Yeah, so that's usually what we teach in the intro classes. It's pretty common. The Esri software is really common in other places, so why bother to learn something else? I mean, the fact that it's free is cool. Fits most people's budgets. One of the big ones, well, it's a robust and powerful GIS, which is true. It's amazing. It runs on Mac, Linux, and Windows. So if you've ever had to do dual boot to make your GIS software work, you don't have to do that with QGIS. It runs on everything, including possibly working on Android and Chromebook as well, but that's a little trickier. But natively, it runs on Mac, Linux, and Windows. So everyone can have it. No fancy rebooting weirdness. It's free of charge. There are frequent updates and bug fixes. I got several emails, which was kind of cool, that were like, so it says I should download 3.6 when I told you guys 3.4. That's because bug fixes happen quick. And when I wrote this workshop a couple months ago, it was 3.4. Now it's 3.6. Things move fast, which is good because then if there's problems, it gets fixed. There's a really great community around this, so that's fun. It's also really good for getting help. You can also program for this. Because it's open source, you can make your own programs for it. You can do things in R, Python, or PostGIS. You can connect all that up and run it all together. Other nice things to have is that it works natively with open data formats like GeoJSON and GeoPackage, which if you're new to GIS, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense yet, but if you've worked with GIS before, you might be excited about the idea of not having to send your friends shapefiles in a zip. So there you go. It also comes in more than 40 languages. So if English is not your native language and you would be more happy working in another language, it has been translated into more than 40 languages. If there's a language that you would like to see it translated into that does not exist, there's a community for helping with that. I had an intern a few years ago who helped with a Tagalog translation, for example. So just anybody who speaks the language well can help do that translation. So there's that. It's also got growing use by local, state, federal, and international governments. So you'll see that more and more on job applications. It also just doesn't hurt to know more than one GIS. I can tell you I work with like 5, so it doesn't hurt to know things. All right, so that was the why part of this and sort of why I'm excited about it. I will also mention I did my dissertation research here. I got my PhD in geography. I used an open source stack. I graduated in 2012. I was just looking back at the list of versions and was like, geez Louise, I was on version 1.3 when I was working on my dissertation stuff. Light years different, but it's still good then. So because it's free, you can take it with you when you leave an academic environment. So that's also really powerful. As someone who does research independently outside of my job, being able to have access to software is really an important thing when you are not necessarily supported by a lab funding situation. Or if you have research that is hard to fund, this is free, so you don't need to budget for it. Maybe some download time, but all software has that. Okay, so that's sort of the commercial for why I think QGIS is really powerful and really helpful. Any questions before we move into data types? Feel free to ask me questions as we go. I'll repeat them for the recording, but just ask. I like to encourage people to ask me dumb questions too. So if it's a dumb question, I want to know because it's probably not dumb. Or other people probably have the question too. So I just ask. Okay, so, oh, yeah.
You mentioned that QGIS can work with open access types, work with ArcGIS file types.
So yeah, so the question is, can QGIS work with the ArcGIS file types? Yes. So it can work with any data type that is pretty common, like shapefile, yes, for sure. I've seen a little bit of trouble with the geodatabase type stuff, but I would generally encourage you not necessarily to use those unless you have a really big need for it, just because in terms of data management, they can make things a little bit more hairy. So yeah, but things like shapefiles, geotiffs, any common raster or vector format are available to open in both softwares. Also in other types of things, like if you're working in a spatial database, you can import those as well. Yeah. Uh-huh.
If you have a map project that's in art, is there a way to transfer it?
So, okay, so the question was, if you've got a project that's already in art, can you open the project file in QGIS? Or transfer? Yeah, so the data itself will open. The only thing you'll lose is the styling. So like ArcGIS's MXD format is basically a file that points to your data, says, okay, go load this data, go load that data, and then style it in this way. So you can always bring the data in. There is a person who is currently writing a tool that will import your ArcGIS MXD files into QGIS. I don't know what the status of that project is, but I'm hearing a lot of buzz about it, so I'm guessing it's getting pretty close. Alex, do you have? Okay, so the comment was it might still be open for crowdfunding, but it is in progress. I wouldn't count on it, but the data is usable in either place. So you can always bring your data in, you can always, restyle it. So I don't anticipate that all of the styling would necessarily come through when we're making the switch, but if you've got something set up that, you've got everything where you need it, having that to be able to be transported would be nice. Yeah, but these are great questions. Any others before I move on? Okay. Don't hesitate to stop me either if I say something you're like, hold on, wait, I have questions about this. Okay, so the two main data types we're going to be working with today, and the types you'll see most frequently, unless you really work with like elevation data a lot, these two data types are going to be really, really common. And that is vector data and raster data. So if you've had intro to GIS, these may be familiar, but it's always good to stop and revisit it as well, because you can always cement your understanding a little bit better. So I made a little table here and diagrams because I'm visual, so I draw pictures. Hopefully, you know, you're a spatial person if you're in this workshop, so hopefully you will also appreciate pictures. Okay, so we have two different types of data. So we've got discrete and continuous. Discrete is just objects, like this is a podium, that's a table. Those are objects, so those are discrete things. It either is or it isn't. Or continuous data is things like an elevation, like if I'm on the top of a mountain, I could be at 10 feet, but if I take a few steps down, I'm at 9.5, and then another step and maybe 9.3. So it's like data that is sort of, well, it's continuous, right? There's always a value wherever you are. You think temperature too. Everywhere you go, there's a temperature. Might be higher or lower. It could be fractions of a degree different, but it's always there. So that's continuous. So when we have those kinds of data, we have two different data formats they could come in, either vector or raster. Vector, you can see up here on this part of the diagram. Vector is really good at discrete data. Vector is represented with points, lines, or polygons. So when you think of a map, typically, like if I just said, hey, get out a piece of paper and draw a map for how to get back to your office or where your next class is, you're going to draw me stuff in vector format, because you're going to say, oh, go down this road, go around this building, and then I'm in this building and my office is here with a star, right? That's vector data. That lines and polygons for buildings and things like that, that's discrete entities. So our brains tend to think that way as people. With vector data, representing a continuous field is a little bit more challenging. So I have this diagram here that looks like contour lines. Contour lines are a vector way to represent things like elevation, something that's continuous. So I have to chunk it up. I have to make discrete binned representations of that continuous field to work with vector. So it's kind of like making like a bar chart, sort of. You have continuous data and you've got to bin it up to make it have discrete lines and boundaries. Raster data, on the other hand, is really good at continuous data. So if I'm looking at, I'll use my pointer so they can see on the recording. If I'm using raster for continuous data here, every one of my cells, so raster is a grid, and each one of those boxes in the grid holds one piece of information. For example, elevation. Maybe at the top here, this is the top of the mountain and this is 10 meters high. Maybe it's 0 over here in the far corner with the lightest color there, and that's right at sea level. But in between, I can represent any number, right? Like this one could be, you know, 9.8, and this one could be 5.2. It could be any number in that gradient. So raster data is really good at representing continuous data. Not so much with discrete data. So if I've got my same like lines and polygons and points, I kind of have to make them into little boxes. It looks pixely, and depending on the scale, it could be more or less helpful. The more pixels you have, the better it is at representing discrete things, but raster is really much better suited to continuous data. So keep that in mind as we go forward, and you'll get some experience with this. So you'll start to feel it a little bit more intuitively as well once you get some hands-on time. Just got some notes here. Let me make sure I told you everything that I need to tell you. Oh, so raster data also is, even though, like I told you, you're more familiar with vector data because if I asked you to draw a map to your department, you would draw vector data. You actually use raster data all the time. This morning when you got your phone out and took a picture of your dog doing something cute, you create a raster data because digital images, photos are raster data. If you zoom in on those, you start seeing pixels, right? You see the little boxes that have the colors in them. So that's raster data. It's pixels, it's little squares, and it's continuous. It covers the whole field. Like there's not missing pieces to it. So anyway, you actually use raster data all the time. Every time you take a photo, you've created raster data. All right. Okay, so that's the whirlwind tour of basic data types that you will see when you work with spatial data. There are other types, like if you've ever heard of a point cloud, that's the kind of data that comes out of a LiDAR system, like a laser scanner that tells you elevations. Different kind of data. We'll have whole new workshops on that next year. And also things like there's triangulated irregular networks, TINs, and there's fish nets and things like that that we're not going to cover today. But what we're doing today is the basics so that you will understand those later if you need them. All right, questions about vector raster data? Put my image back up just for a second. Okay, seems like we're good, but ask as we go. Okay, so let's get this data so we can make some maps. All right, so today we're going to be working with some data that is from the city of San Francisco. Because it's all online, they've got this great data portal that's got all kinds of fun data on it. So we're going to be working with a digital elevation model. So this is raster data. So it's cells that have elevations in each of the grids. We're going to be working with the street data, the tree data, and then if we get to it, the end of the workshop, we use the seismic hazard zones and also the city of San Francisco boundary we can put in just for reference. So that data is linked here on this box folder. So take a minute and go ahead and download that data so that we've got that, so we're all working on the same stuff. So I'm going to give you a minute or two to go ahead and download that. When you're done, I'll just keep asking who needs more time. So go ahead and do that right now.
You want all of them downloaded? All five?
Yes, so if you, is there not a link to download everything? So there's a download link up here in the top corner. Should download a zip.
Do you want the zips inside the zip expanded?
It's a good idea to do that. So I'm saving it to right now so that I've got a clean set of data, and also I'll know how long it's going to take you guys to do it if I do it with you. And I lost my instructions, so I will go back and find those. So also make sure you put the data where you can find it easily. You know, don't just plop it anywhere like on your C drive that's in a strange place. Put it someplace where it's findable. So when you download it and you extract it, it will look something like this. I'm going to go ahead and unzip my zipped files. Oh, there we go. I don't know if we need those.
You want to keep all the files outside?
That's a good question. QGIS will be able to open those zips without unzipping them, but I find that if things kind of move better if you unzip them. They don't have to stay in the folders. My personal preference is to not have a bunch of folders. I generate enough on my own, but you can, as long as you understand what your data structure looks like, it's fine. All right, how are we doing? Does anyone need another minute? You want to tell me now if you need a minute, because otherwise I will move on. You guys good over here?
Select everything and put it on the desktop?
No, just put it wherever you can find it, whatever your folder preference is. Yeah, so there's a download link at the top of that box folder. You go to it. So if anyone's downloading them one at a time, there is this download button here on the download link where it'll download a zip of everything, so you don't have to download things one at a time. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so it seems to be working on Chrome for me, but if you're working on another browser or if Chrome's not working for you, try something else.
We hit a bug in Safari.
Okay, good to know. So Safari might be a problem for that. Or Internet Explorer, Edge, whatever it is now. All right, so how are we doing? Does everyone have the data? No, or getting close perhaps. All right. No, you don't need to log into Box. It should just dismiss the message at the top, and then you'll see the download button. It's kind of hiding. So the question is, where did I get the DEM? There should be in the folder, this README. If you open the README, it has the links to where I got all of the data for this. Yeah, so actually, let's take a look at it right now. If it will open. So the DEM is from the NED dataset, so National Elevation Data. And I've clipped it down from something much larger so that it was more usable in this, but you can get, this comes from a much larger scene that covers like the entire peninsula for San Francisco, and I think also Marin. But there are other, I believe it's nationwide availability. Some of the data sets we have are just California, but I believe NED covers all of the US for free. And that's available at the USGS Earth Explorer site. Yeah. All right, so I think it seems like everybody is either in progress or ready to move on. So I think I will go ahead and move on to the next part of this. Okay, so we've got our data and now we're ready to actually open the program. Yes, this is the thing you came for, right? All right, so we can't jump into a program without knowing what we're doing. So I'm going on Windows, I'm going to my start menu. I have QGIS pinned because I'm the GIS data curator, so I've got all the GISs, but these are the ones I use most. So I'm gonna open QGIS 3.4. You on your computer are going to find your thing that starts the QGIS that you downloaded, either 3.4 or 3.6, and go ahead and start it up. On all of your computers, it will be different depending on your operating system. So I'll show you what I've got, but yours may be a different process. So, and this will take a second to load. My work computer is having its own special issues sometimes, so mine will probably take longer than yours. So we'll have a race. But don't fret if this is taking around a minute to open. That's normal. Yours will be faster most likely. See, I told you it's going to take a while. Here we go. Okay, so I will say if yours is opened and you've never opened QGIS before, it doesn't look like this, does it? It looks blank. Yeah.
Does he want to import his settings from
Oh,
QGIS too?
good question. So no, you don't need to. Unless you had QGIS 2 and you loved your settings, I would just say no to that one. Yeah. So if anyone else is seeing the question that comes up, do I want to import my settings from QGIS 2? Unless you had QGIS 2 installed, just say no to that. I had it installed and I don't think I imported anything. It's not that big a deal. Okay, so if this is the first time you're opening QGIS, you won't have projects. I have projects because I do GIS for a living, so you can see I've got a lot of projects. Apparently a lot of data exploring based on the titles there, but it remembers the things that I've been doing and it will offer them up. I can scroll down. Sorry, I've got Zoom things popping up for the recording. If I scroll down on this, oh, cranky work computer is saying I can't scroll. Sorry, give that a second. Anyway, what I was gonna show is there's a lot of projects and it will remember quite a few of them so that you can just open it up and click on the thing that you were working on last and just get going, which is handy. There, now it's gonna scroll. So you can see I've got a lot of different things going on, a lot of different maps, things that actually look like finished products because they've been shipped out. Anyway, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna click on this blank page icon up here in the corner. You can also go to project and click new, either way. So we're gonna start a new blank document. So again, the easiest way to find it probably is to go to the project menu and then click on new. All right, so I'm clicking on new and ta-da, it's not that exciting yet. We will make it exciting in a minute. So this is QGIS. It will be more apparent what all this stuff does in a minute, hopefully. I should also mention your toolbars up here at the top will be different than what I have. Again, I work with this almost daily, so I have toolbars installed that you guys aren't gonna have. This little orange guy here is my plugin that I write. Alex and I are co-authors on this, coders. So you don't have that because you probably don't even know what it is. And that's okay. But anyway, that's all to say, I have other toolbars because of things that I've been doing that are slightly different. So if yours is a little bit more pared down than this, don't worry, you didn't do something wrong. It's just mine looks a little bit different. Okay, so we are going to load up some data next. And just going over here to the notes. All right, so we are going to load up, let's do the raster data first. So back to QGIS. Oh, cranky work computer's thinking about it. Sorry, it does this to me too when I'm working. It'll just be like, not loading data. So what we will do, I'll point this out and then I'll actually show you. We're gonna add data with this, oh, now it's thinking about it. The add data button over here. So the open source or open data source manager. The button looks like a stack of 3 cards that are kind of splayed out. One's red, yellow, and blue, and a little plus. You can also get there by, which menu is it? Layer menu. So you can go to the layer menu and you can also click data source manager from the layer menu if you're having trouble locating the icon. Okay, so I'm gonna start that guy up. And this is what this looks like. It's not gonna let me move it because cranky work computer. So when it does load, we're gonna click, notice on the side here, you have a whole bunch of different options. Some of these right now, don't worry about what they mean. What we really care about right now is vector data and raster data, right? Those are familiar, we just talked about those. So I'm gonna click on raster because that's what we're gonna load first. So again, in this menu, I've clicked on raster so that I can load raster data. Remember, raster data is that grid data, right? It's got pixels. This is gonna be an image. So once I get here, there's this button that has the ... on it, ellipsis marks. So you can click on that button and this will be where we navigate to where we saved our data. So I put mine in a folder on my D drive. This is why it's gonna be helpful that you put it somewhere where you can find it because we will need it. Okay, so I'm looking for the file that's called DEM_SF. And it's a TIFF file, so it has this little icon in Windows, and I think Mac does this too, where it gives you an icon that means, oh, it's a picture. It is a picture. It just happens to also have spatial data embedded in it. So Windows and your regular Mac operating system will say, this is just a picture. But QGIS will be able to read some more information out of it. So I'm going to pick this one, the DEM_SF. You can either double click it or highlight it and click OK. And you'll see it just puts the path here. The nice thing is you can actually, if we needed to load multiple things, we could load up multiple things at once. So has everybody got, oh, question.
And so, in that, in loading multiple things, so that means it's kind of like, there's a shift type of.
Yeah, exactly. So you can either, hold down shift and select a bunch, or control and pick things off the list if they're not lined up. So yeah, you could upload or import multiple different files, which is pretty common. Like I work with topo data, the USGS topo maps a lot, and a lot of times we'll need multiple ones of those. So I'll just select a bunch of them all at once. Okay, so once everybody has gotten to this point, is everybody good? All right, so I'm gonna click add. Oh, it loaded quick for a change. Yay. So you'll see underneath something showed up on my screen. So once you've got that, you can go ahead and click close. So you can just take a look and see, it should look something like this. Yours might look a little different just depending on how it decided to do the initial image, especially on the projector. It might look a little darker, a little lighter, depending on what the projector is doing today. But as long as you've got something that generally looks like this, we're good. All right. So how are we doing? Does everyone have a raster up on their screen, the DEM, digital elevation model? Okay. All right. We have our handy helpers here if you need some help or if you have questions too. All right, so now we're going to load some shapefiles. These are vector data, so points, lines, and polygons. So we're going to get the street center lines. We can also add in the hazard zones, the shorelines, and that should be good. Oh, let's see. Yeah. So again, I'm going to go back to my my add data button, the data source manager, just like where we were before. We'll give it a second to figure that out. And so once this opens up, remember how we had on the side panel, it had like raster, vector, all these other things. Oh, here we go. So in this case, we were working with raster. Now we're going to click on vector because we're going to add vector data this time, some points, lines, and polygons. And again, just like with the raster, I'm going to click on the ellipsis mark button, the dot, dot, dot. And now I get to select out. You can either load in your, when it unzipped, it gave us some crazy data names, which I'm not thrilled about. So let's use the zips instead. So let's go ahead and select the street center lines, and I'm going to hold down Control or Command when I click, and then I'll select multiple things. So I'm holding down Control and I'm selecting all of my zips because that way I've got my street center lines, the seismic hazard zones, and my shoreline. And I know the font is really small and weird on the screen, so I'm just going to read them to you. So I'm taking those three things, the center lines, the seismic hazard zones, and the shorelines and islands. And these are the zip files. So once I've got those selected, I'm going to pick Open. And now you'll see, actually, if you look in this box here, you can kind of scroll over. I'm using the arrow button on my keyboard. You'll see that it actually has multiple paths in there that are quoted. So if you ever needed to check, like, did I get all three of them? You can look there. So once I've got that, I'm going to click Add, just like we did before. And then you can kind of see around the edge that some stuff has popped up, which looks good to me. So after that, I'm going to click Close. So now my project looks like this. The colors on yours, in all likelihood, will be different because QGIS is going to pick a random color to make everything. When I was working on this workshop, it turned everything hot pink. It was like stuck in a like pink and red loop, and it was very strange. Now we're on to greens and browns, which is a little bit easier to look at. All right, how are we doing? Has everyone got something that looks like this? Remember, if you need help, we've got helpers that can help. And if we get really slammed, I will run away from the screen and help.
I'm getting download with protocol source. I pass fail. Do you want to try file source type?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I'll say yes.
Sure, see if it works.
That now nothing works, I'll say no.
Okay, let's get, hey, Alex, can you help? That's giving her an error with the importing the data.
Mine looks
That's okay. It will pick literally, it picks a random color. So we will make it look better in a minute, I promise. Yeah, no, never use the defaults, never. If you want to use the default, think real hard about it. All right, so I'm just waiting another minute while people get their data into their project before we move on to the final data type that I want to show you.
Yeah. So it just, so all the others I should just delete.
All right, so a little bit of a recap while we wait. We've loaded up some raster data, which is a digital elevation model, so that the information in that DEM is elevation data. So it shows us what the heights are of the surface of the city of San Francisco. And then we've loaded up 3 raster files as well. So we've got the streets, we've got seismic hazard zones, and then we also have the shoreline, which is just the outline of the city of San Francisco, like what the boundary is. So after this, we are going to import data as a CSV, a comma separated variable file, because that's one of the more common ways that people get point data. So I want to show you that as well. So we'll do that next. All right, so how's everybody doing? We're ready to go? I'm not seeing anyone saying, oh my goodness, stop. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on unless anyone needs another minute. I'm trusting you to tell me you need another minute or you have questions. All right, here we go. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're gonna download, or we're gonna import some CSV data. This file type is a text file that all of the pieces of information, you can kind of think of it as like if you've worked in Excel or any kind of spreadsheet, it's like a spreadsheet, but instead of being binary, like that you can't read on your own, it's actually text. And the way that the program knows where the columns go is they put a comma between each of the things. So you can think of, instead of putting a bar for like the line for the column, we're gonna put a little comma instead. You can actually read this with a text editor, which is handy. But this is one way that I really find is common to get point data. So these are going to be point data, so it's vector data, and these are tree locations for a city of San Francisco. I think Davis folks generally understand the concept of a street tree. So a tree that is owned by the homeowner but maintained by the city. We have this concept in the city of Davis. I think Woodland also has it too. It's pretty common around this area. So that's the data we're going to be loading up into QGIS next. So the key with this data is that there are 2 special columns in this data set. One is the latitude and one is the longitude. So as long as you have a column with latitude and one with longitude, we can bring that into a GIS and turn it into spatial data. So again, we're going back to our add data button. Now you will all be pros at adding data to QGIS because you will have done it 3 times. All right, so again, we have all these options, right? I told you it's vector data. However, it's special vector data. And it is the kind of data that is comma separated or delimited. So we're going to pick the option here for delimited text. Delimited just means that it has a delimiter. In most cases, it's a comma, but you could use a semicolon, you could use a pipe, you could use an asterisk, you could make it the letter T. Don't make it the letter T. It's too common, but you could do it. Like seriously, there are ways to do that. And if you knew that you were never going to use a certain character, like how many of you even know what a pipe is? A few of you, but most people aren't going to use a pipe in their everyday language, so it's pretty safe to use. Semicolon also not super widely used, but if you ever have a data set where people can put in their own free form text, you probably want to avoid comma and semicolon as delimiters. But in this case, it is a CSV. We are going to tell it what file with, again, the ellipsis mark button up here at the top next to file name. So I'm going to click on that. Let's see. And it remembered where I am. So I'm going to pick my street tree map.csv. So CSV, again, stands for comma separated variable. And click open. Yeah.
So when I'm trying to open and load the files, I noticed mine was not in terms of colors, but that yours come out as single and mine came out as like 3 repeated things of the same thing. Oh. And what happens when I'm trying to load it and I'm trying to redo it now, I can do it differently, is that I went in and I had already unzipped
Mhm.
folder, and so it was just an unzipped folder.
Uh-huh.
When I clicked on that, it would let me then open it. It would take me in. Do I just then click on the shapefile in there?
Yeah, so you only want to load the .shp file of the shapefile. So shapefiles, this is why shapefile's not as useful format as it could be, because shapefiles are actually like at least three, sometimes more files that have to stay together. So if you're going to load it in QGIS, you don't need to highlight all of the files that go with it. Just tell it pick the .shp of the family of files that needs to stay together, and then it should load properly. All right. So, yeah. Okay, so right now we've told it we're going to work with the street tree map.csv, and we've done that by clicking on the ... button. I don't know what a better term for it is. That's what it looks like, so that's what I will call it. And then we have some more information. This looks a little different than the other data that we loaded, and that's because it's a CSV and there was a lot of things that could be different about it, mainly the delimiter. So the default is for CSV, which is what we actually have. But I'm going to click on custom delimiter so you can see there are other options. So it could be a tab that tells it instead of comma. We could have a tab character. We could have colon space. We could have another one. So if I decided I wanted to make the letter T the separator, I could tell it right there in the other box, hey, look for the letter T. Again, bad choice, but you could do it. So it could be anything. But I'm going to click back on CSV because that's actually what we have. So it's separated by commas. You could actually have multiple characters too. This is why there's this information panel that we have to fill out, because a CSV or a delimited file could have any number of settings. So we have to tell it some information so that it reads properly. Another thing to look for is this box right here that says first record has field names, which means at the top of my spreadsheet, I have column names that have useful information. Sometimes I don't have that. Like census data sometimes doesn't come with that. And if I don't want to add it on my own and I just know like column 10 is the one I want, I don't have to have that. But you want to make sure that you mark this appropriately. Otherwise, it will make assumptions about your data that may not be true. And then also you can have your geometry type down here. If it's lat long data, chances are it's WGS 84, so you can leave the default. But someone could give you lat long in UTM coordinates. That's common. Some GPSs will output that instead. So you could change that here if you knew that it was different. Yeah.
So did you say when you already had latitude and longitude that the point coordinates would be the default, or would you keep that one?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I did miss this excellent question, making sure I don't screw up in front of the audience. So also in this section for geometry definition, you can tell the last thing I loaded was a table that didn't have geometry, so it remembered that. For this data set, I have point coordinates, so I'm going to pick the point coordinate radio button. And then if you have columns that have word names like latitude, longitude, lat long, it will kind of pick those and guess, but I can also pick. So I can look at this list and these are all of my column names. So if I knew it was something different, like maybe I had X and Y as well for some reason, I could decide to pick that instead. But the defaults, I think in this case will work. Yeah, question in the back. That's a good question. It might, but you should always check too and make sure that it is the correct one, because it can guess wrong and sometimes it will, and that's okay. But that's why we want to make sure that we fill it all out, and also do it in front of a nice big audience. So when you forget stuff, they'll remind you. That helps. Okay, so let's just check and see. I think all the rest of this we can. I think it looks good. But also, it previews down there. Yeah. So in this case, it should be set to WGS 84. So EPSG code 4326. That is very typical if it's latitude, longitude, and degrees, which this is. But you could have other ones, and you would know that because either the person who made the data would tell you, or you collected the data so you would know. If it looks like regular lat long type numbers, it's probably WGS 84. That's a good guess. All right, and then down at the bottom here, it'll actually preview. So if you had gotten your delimiter wrong, you could look and be like, oh wait, those columns don't make sense. But this one looks good to me just because I have familiarity with this data. So if you're looking through it and you're like, okay, yeah, that looks pretty decent, then you're okay. Oh, so actually in this data set, there's a Y chord and an X chord, which looks like probably a UTM coordinate system to me. So you could pick that if you knew what geometry that was or what projection, you could use that instead. But I don't know what that one is, so I'm not going to use it. But I do know what the lat long one is, so I'll keep that. Okay, so does everyone's data look sort of like this right now on the screen? Okay, so let's click add. Yeah.
The sample data part looks different.
Sample data. Oh, in here? I scrolled over, so yours might look different just because I've scrolled to a different part of the data. Oh, now it went away because I loaded it, and so now it's gone. I can get it back once QGIS decides to respond. Sorry, this isn't normal. This is my computer being slow. Like normally, your computers probably aren't hanging right now.
Is there a way to add it without having it in the start?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I will also mention that there's other ways to load data. Like I can drag and drop stuff from my file browser, and I can just drag and drop it in. With the CSV, you don't want to do that because it will make assumptions about your data that are probably not true. It also won't read in the data types. It'll make everything text. So if you have numbers and you want them to be numbers so you can analyze them as numbers, you don't want to do it that way. So this is pretty much the best way to bring in CSV data. I've learned this the hard way because I bring it in the easy way and then I have problems and then I have to reload it. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and close this interface now. And you can see we've loaded a bunch of street trees on this map, which is cool, right? Like, look at all those trees in San Francisco. And that's not really all the trees. That's just the street trees. This isn't everybody's backyard tree. It's just the one the city is responsible for. Okay. So we've added data to QGIS. And this data, even though most of it came from the city of San Francisco, these come from different departments. No one was saying like, hey, let's make sure all this data goes together. No, they were not. All they said was, let's make spatial data. And because it's spatial, I can load it all in the same place and it will all sit together on the planet just because it knows where it is. So that's it's a really powerful thing when you think about it. All these departments can make data and then it will all go together just because it has the same location. All right, so this is just the instructions for how to do the CSV. Yeah.
Does the order of the layering matter?
Yes, that's a great question. So the question was, does the order of the layering matter? And the answer is yes. The things that are on the top of the list render on the top of the pile. So just think of it as like pile order, like a pile of puppies. Whatever's on top is the one you see.
And if that was different, we wouldn't see the trees?
Yeah. Yeah, so like if I drug my DEM, which it's a raster, so it covers everything. If I bring that up on top, I'll only see the DEM. It will sit on top and I won't see anything else. It's like putting a piece of paper over the top. Yeah.
Just to like, so the DEM, was that like an image of like, I guess, maybe I missed you saying, is that like San Francisco? A picture?
It could be, but it's actually, it's actually elevation data. So it's like a picture in that it has pixels, but instead of having color information, each of those boxes has a piece of information about what elevation it is. So once we start playing with the representation of it, I think you'll understand it a little bit better. But it's similar to a picture, but it's not like an air photo. Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so really quick, let's save our data because stuff crashes and we don't have to reload this. So you save your data by clicking on this save button up here at the top. You can also click on the project button. I believe in the project menu, there will also be a save button. Okay, there you go. Sounds like Command X will also save on a Mac. It will probably tell you on the menu too what options there are. All right, so mine has finally started responding. So I'm going to click on the save button up here. So the save project. And again, this just saves where my data is and then how I want to style it. So I'm going to click on save, and then you've seen this before if you've ever saved a Word document. You're going to give it a name, you're going to tell it where to put it. And it stopped responding. So again, apologies. Cranky work computer is in action here. So you will save it in a place where it will, where you can find it. I'm going to put mine in my workshop data for this when it starts responding. I need to have a talk with IT apparently. No, it's just always like this. Yeah, question in the back.
No worries if you want to get into this. You're at a substantive QGIS.
Yeah, good question. So when I wrote this workshop several months ago, the answer was don't use a QGZ, it's having problems. Now it doesn't matter. There are advantages to either one. So at this point, it does not matter. They both will work. But like I said, things move quick with open source stuff. QGZ wasn't working so good a few months ago, but now I have no problems with it. So use whichever you feel like. The difference is just the QGZ file is a zipped version of the QGIS file. It's the default now, so I think that's what they want you to go with. Any input from Alex?
I assume they just did it because it saves.
Okay, so space saving for the QGZ file. Yeah.
I like the QGIS files because they're text files. You can open them in.
That's true. Yeah, so either one, functionally for someone who's not going to get into the nitty gritty details, either one will be fine. I tend to leave the default now just because it's the default and human nature, I'm lazy. But before, like a few months ago, I had to be careful to make sure to change it because the QGZ files weren't opening again for some reason on my computer, but now it seems fine. Okay, so again, we're saving this with the save dialog. Same deal like if you're saving a Word document, it says where do you want to put it, where do you want to call it. So I'm going to click save. And now I've saved it. So it's remembering the data, what data I've loaded, and then how I wanted to style it. This is an unfortunate styling choice right now, but it's the defaults. We'll fix that in a minute. Okay, so we've saved that. So now we're going to work with the raster data. So I'm going to have you right now, we're going to turn off the other data. And I turn that off by clicking on the check marks. If I click the button, it unchecks it and the data disappears. It's still there, I've just turned it off so I'm not visualizing it. And now also with this version of QGIS, it also grays it out and makes it a slant font or italic font so that I know that it's very visually clear it's not currently loaded, which is kind of nice, some visual hierarchy. Cartographers in action here. So now all I have showing is this DEM. So again, DEM stands for Digital Elevation Model. So the information I have in each of the cells here is elevation. So I'm going to click on the zoom in button, and I'm just going to zoom in on one part of this data so you can see I'm not lying to you when I say that there are pixels in here. So notice how it's probably not super apparent on the projector, but if you did this with your computer and zoom in a whole bunch, you'll start to see little squares, right? Each of those squares is a pixel, and each pixel contains one piece of information. That piece of information is the elevation inside that square. Obviously, it's chunked up in some way. San Francisco is not full of little square, flat areas, but it's a representation. All right, so I promise that's what the data is. And then I'm going to right click on my DEM in the table of contents / layers panel, and I'm going to click zoom to layer just so I can zoom back out and see everything. Okay, so let's style this thing because black and white is not so intuitive. So I'm going to turn on my layers panel, and I'm going, or sorry, my styling panel in, sorry, I'm getting too many things open. So I'm going to the view menu, and then I want to look in what is in my panels list. So in the panels, I'm going to turn on my layer styling. So I'm in the view menu, go down to the panels, and then there's like a little arrow, and then I go over to my layer styling, and I'm going to check that. When I check it, of course, it goes away and opens up the thing. So again, I went to the view menu, and then I came down here to panels, and then I clicked on layer styling. And now mine's checked because it's open, but yours won't be checked until you click it. right, so what that should do is we'll open up this layer styling panel on the side. And it will hopefully be set to your DEM, but if it's not, you can click on the button and you can pick the one off the list that you want to style. So again, we're going to be working with the DEM to start. I'm going to flip back over to the notes so I remember what settings I'm going to tell you to use. Okay, so we are going to, switching back, it's hanging, but to make sure I slow down and don't leave anyone in the dust. All right, so we are going to, instead of picking single band gray, which is the default, we're going to pick single band pseudo color, which sounds very fancy, but we'll work with it. And the default that it picked is quite interesting. Again, only stick with the defaults if you've thought about it. I would not pick this one personally. So again, I changed the type of display from single band gray to single band pseudo color. And then mine chose this particular color ramp, which is, I'm not sure that it's the best option.
Mine is hurting my eye.
Do you guys have questions in the back? I know, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that's a good point. Mine is remembering something, so it's good to point out when yours looks different. So you can click on the color ramp and just pick something. Sorry. Yeah. We're gonna fix this in a second. The defaults are not something we're gonna keep. Sorry, my computer's hanging again. Yes, definitely. Again, remind me if my screen looks different, it's probably because it's remembering what I've done in the past. So tell me, and that way I'll remember to mention it. Oops. I've lost my QGIS. So if you, like mine wasn't showing the edge of the screen, I'm just resizing it by clicking on the edge and dragging it over so I can see everything. You can pick off the list, just if you don't have one, you can pick something else. I'm not gonna pick something because it's gonna make my computer hang, so I'll just stick with this for now and then I'll show you. It doesn't matter what it looks like right now, we're going to change it anyway. So let me just check settings. Okay, so and then in your, sorry, we have questions, yeah. So if you go into the layer properties, it will be different than layer styling. You can make your changes there. In QGIS 3.4 though, the raster stuff wasn't working as well. So that's why I'm using the layer styling panel instead. There was some issues where it would reset the min-max values all the time and basically turn off the display. So it was a little bit safer to work in the layer styling panel. It might be fixed in 3.6 and it won't matter. All right, so I'm also going to click on my min-max settings and I'm just gonna tell it, instead of, so mine's already set to whole raster. You want to tell it to use the whole raster so that it makes your estimate based on all the values so it doesn't leave any off. This one's a small enough raster that we can do the whole one. If it was like the size of the US and really fine pixels, I wouldn't do that. But for this one, because of the type of work we're doing, I'm going to pick whole raster. And then for the estimate or the accuracy, I'm going to tell it to do actual. That way it doesn't grab a sample, it'll actually look at the whole set of values and pick my min and max based on that. It's minor, but it can be helpful. All right, and then so we can also, I'm noticing every time I switch back to QGIS it hangs, so I apologize for that. Unfortunately, I lost the printout that I thought I had and didn't have time to reprint this, so we're just gonna have to wait.
That's a good thing, at least.
All right. How's everyone doing so far? Okay, so yeah, question. So that is it's using basically we're telling it to how much of the data to look at to make a decision about what the min and max values are. So we can have it, if it was like a really big raster data set and it was going to take forever to look at all of the values, I would let it sample. But because this is a small area and I've clipped it down, and because we're doing this for cartographic purposes or display purposes, I want to use the whole thing so it knows what the actual min and max are and doesn't guess. Because normally it would take like a sample of a certain percentage and then decide what the likely min and max are based on that. But now, because of the type of data, I want to make sure that we have that information, like the whole set of information. Yeah, that's a good question. All right, so I am going to try not to look at the notes because it's freaking out my computer. So we're gonna try to do it this way. All right, so for the interpolation type, I'm gonna pick discrete. So what that's gonna do, it's kind of going to make like bins for the data, and it's going to make the visualization of this a little bit better. You can play with the settings on this for sure. This is not the only way to do it. This is just one way. So I'm going to pick, for the interpolation type, I'm going to pick discrete. So that's up here. And then for the mode, I'm going to pick equal interval. So you can already see it kind of blocked up my data, but this is good because this is going to help with the visualization. And then for my classes, I'm going to pick 10. And then hopefully the display will update as we go. Not so good, right? In terms of visualizing the data set, I can't really see the edges of San Francisco. The way that it's currently creating the data, I'm not super happy with. I'm gonna pick a different color ramp because that's going to help. Hi. Oh, I have notes on the screen, thank you. Excellent. All right, so I'm also going to pick a different color ramp. So I am going to pick, this is a little not intuitive, I'm gonna create a new color ramp. I'm not actually going to create one. This is going to get me into a menu that's really helpful, but it's just an unfortunate name. So I'm going to create color ramp, and instead of gradient, I am going to pick, we're all going to slow down, wait for the computer. But there's going to be another menu that pops up, and we're going to pick something else. So I'm looking at the notes to see what it says so that I tell you the right thing, since I can't see it. Okay, so there's going to be an option there that's called CPT-city. So you're going to pick that, and I will pick it when my computer decides it's going to let me pick it.
What does it mean?
You know, I'm not, Alex, do you know what it's a gradient set that someone has created, but I don't know what the CPT, I don't know what the name means at all, to be honest. It's just a really handy set of gradients that somebody has made and made available. Oh, here we go. So I'm going to pick, again, catalog and then CPT-city. So yours should look like this. Tell me if it doesn't, because again, my computer will remember things that I've done, like setting up the workshop. Yeah. So I'm going to pick that one off the list. I'm going to click OK, and it should open up a big dialog with a lot of different color options. Yes. So the color option, I'm going to look under so you've got all these different options on the side, right? And it tells you what the name of the different types of ramps are. So I'm going to pick, I believe we want the topography set. Oh my goodness, computer.
Elevation.
Topography is the one. Yeah.
So all of this will automatically show, it doesn't matter what kind of map we have data posted, all of these options.
Yeah, you can pick any of them.
And they're already, it's almost like it's part of the software.
It is. Yeah, it comes standard. Yeah. Isn't that nice? Somebody did this and it's free. Okay, so I'm going to pick topography, and then I believe it's the CD-A one that I've chosen. Feel free to pick something else if you want to explore or go back. What I'm showing you is not the option. It is one option. You can make choices based on your data. So again, I'm finding the one under topography that is CD-A, but you could pick something else for your own choice if you'd like. So I'm going to click OK. And it's going to take my computer a second. Also, all of the instructions are online. I have it now on this handy dandy screen. But you can also follow along if you need to find like the names of stuff. It's printed there. My computer is currently working through me choosing another color ramp. It has not been this bad. It's like it knows it's presenting, and it's like, let me show you how I can misbehave. Yeah, this one especially. It's a special computer. All right, there we go, finally. So the good news is this slows me down so you all have a chance to get yours caught up. So maybe it's okay. All right, so this is at least a little, to my eye, this is a little bit more pleasing. What we can also do too is we can change, it's breaking it up right now, equal interval, 10 chunks. Maybe I don't want to keep these and I don't have to, so I can actually decide that I want to do something a little bit different. So I can actually change the breaks. If I double click right now where mine says like 31 dot something, I can say I don't want my break at 31 meters. I want to make it 0 because I want to see where the coastline is. So anything below 0 up to 0 is going to be 1. And then I can actually change my label too if I wanted to. I'm just going to call it water. But you can type numbers in there too if you want. All right, so now that's looking a lot better already. So I can actually see where the water is. I can kind of see where the wharfs are and things like that. And so I could actually break up, I can change these breaks as well. So I could change this one maybe to 50 and make that its own. So you can play with that. I'm gonna leave this here now the way it is in the interest of time and moving on to the vector stuff, but you get the idea. I can change where these breaks are, and I can decide, depending on where I put the breaks in terms of which numbers are the boundaries of the discrete entities that I'm creating, I can change how it looks. So you can play with that, but the key here is I wanted to show you at least how to make the water stand out differently. So does everyone have something that looks roughly like this? All right, so we're ready to move on and do some vector styling. All right. All right, so I'm checking my notes here really quick. All right.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I was checking because I wasn't seeing what data we're going to work with next. Okay, so what I want to do now, in the interest of having things load quickly, first of all, I'm going to hit the save button. So everyone click the save button with me. Anytime you're working on one of these projects and your brain thinks, maybe I should save, that is the time to save. Don't stop what you're doing and save, because just like any large program, like even, when you're working in Word, like if you've got a big document open, right? It's likely to crash. Same thing with this, same thing with any GIS or any scientific software, really. Save often. Anytime you think it's time to save, just save, because if you think I'll do one more thing, oh man, don't do that if you want to save.
It's like voting, vote early. Vote.
Yes, exactly. It's like voting, vote early, vote often. So save, and that's good. I'm gonna turn off when the computer starts responding, I'm gonna turn off my DEM and I'm gonna turn on my street layer, because we're going to do some styling with the street data. All right, there we go. So I'm turning off my DEM and everything's gone, and I'm turning on my streets. So I'm also going to, once I turn that on, I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to pick zoom to layer. This just zooms in so it kind of fills up the screen so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, has everyone got some street data showing? All right, and then you see my layer styling panel, because I've switched selections over here, is assuming right now I want to work with the street data, but you should always check because you always want to make sure you're styling the thing that you planned on styling. Okay, so vector data looks a little bit different because we have discrete entities, right? So we're not dealing with data on a grid now, we're dealing with discrete items. And we can change the way that this looks because, well, mine's actually not so bad. Mine has chosen what looks like a gray color. Yours probably is not gray, right? Red, green, probably some blues, oranges. It just picked something random. The fact that mine is currently gray is a fluke. Normally it's some kind of crazy color. it may actually have remembered something I did before, although mine looks on the screen a little bit on the blue side. So with lines and also with polygons and points, the way that QGIS works for symbology is it kind of, you can build things up. So that's why I have this thing here where it says line and then underneath it has simple line. I could actually pile up a bunch of lines and like maybe the bottom line is a fat line and then there's a line on top that's skinny that has like dashes on it. So I could make a road that looks like a divided highway. So I could build up road symbology that way. We're not going to do that right now, but that's why it has this, because we could actually stack up a bunch of different lines. I made a QGIS style that you can get on GitHub that's actually a rainbow for lines. So you could make your, you know, all of your lines be rainbows just because it was fun. So you could do that. So right now I've clicked on simple line here. So I'm editing this part of the line. And in the color menu, I can click on the drop down. Sorry, I want to click on the actual color box. So again, I clicked right here in my color. And then I have different options for colors. I can pick my color with this interface, with this one, or with this one. I could actually use the eyedropper and I could slurp up a color from something else, which is handy. Or also if I scroll down on any of these, I can mess with the hue, saturation, value, the RGB colors. Or I can also put in hex notation. So I can use the HTML color codes. You can decide what you like. I'm gonna, in this case, put in a hex code just so that I get the exact color that I used before. So I'm going to just delete what's there. And in this case, I'm gonna put in 6 6s, 4, 5, 6. And then you'll see that once I've done that, the color changes. So I'm picking a slightly darker color of gray. Now, as a cartographer, I'm a really big fan of really literal color choices until I, have a reason to not. So as we go, you'll see I will be making choices like it's a road, it's asphalt, it will be dark gray. You can choose whatever you like, but just be, when you're making finished maps for various things, think about how you're communicating and, you want the person who's reading it, you want their brain to do as little work as possible. So roads tend to be dark things unless they need to be something else. Okay, so I put in my hex code for gray. You can pick whatever gray or any color you like. And then I'm gonna click on the back button up at the top. So we've made gray roads. That's not very exciting, but it's useful. That's what matters. All right, so now you've seen how to do a single color. And I just wanna mention something about our data set here. Each of these road entities is a line. And all of these lines have what we call attribute information. So if I right click on my lines in my attribute table and in the layers panel, if I click on the attribute table, it will open up this table. Now, each of those lines has a row in my attribute table. So for each of them, I have information like what kind of street it is. Is it a private street? In this case, I think the layer is what layer it came from in the city's list of things. I also have information about maybe the length, when it was added. Cranky work computer's not letting me scroll. Here we go. So I have information about the street name, for example. These are really common pieces of information you'd want to know about a road, right? I have the zip code. I think this one also has a neighborhood as well in it somewhere. But anyway, so I have information about each road. And if I can actually find out about each piece of information in that attribute table because it's vector data. You have a question?
Yeah, if I wanted to say make parks, the lines be green, could I do that?
Yes. Yeah, so if you had roads like that are labeled as like a parkway or something like that, yes. And we'll actually, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna style the roads differently depending on what kind of road they are. So you're right on track. I just want to point out that we have attributes so that you could ask questions like that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close the attribute table. Normally, if this were like a quarter-long class, we'd spend a lot more time on attributes, but I just want to show you that it's there so that you know. So that when you come have a consultation with me on Wednesday afternoons from 2 to 4 in the map room, when I say attribute, you won't look at me completely blank, which is, if you do, that's okay. We can always talk more about it as well. Okay, so that's the attribute table in a very brief introduction. So we can also do things like we can actually select attributes out of the attribute table with the selector. But I think I'm going to skip over that. That's all in the notes online as well. What I want to do is show you how to do some of the styling around that, which uses some of the same information. But just given that I want to get through a couple more things, I think we'll pass over that in the interest of time. So, back in our styling panel, so we want to make sure that we have our street center lines selected. But what we can do is right now we've been styling with single symbol. So up here, it has a drop-down menu, which we didn't even talk about before. But if I click on it, we have options. So in this case, I'm going to pick categorized. Okay, so my data went away. I didn't break it. It's actually, my computer's not even hanging right now, so that's good. It's just because it doesn't know what column we're going to be working from. So what I'm going to do is in the column, I'm going to pick, instead of having it blank, I want to pick class code. That's the one I want. And the class code has information in it about the type of street that it is. I've scrolled past it.
How do you know what these things are?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In this case, because the data came from the city of San Francisco, all this information is online where you downloaded it. Yeah, they do. They have, for this data set, they actually have a list of what it means. And I believe I put that information in the download that you got as well. There's definitely in the README file, there's a link to where I got the data too. So you could check that as well. But yeah, I had to look this up because I was like, first I was like, class code looks promising. And I did some investigation and I finally found out they actually have a list of what the codes mean. So that is good. You would have to have somebody tell you that, or you can make an educated guess a lot of times with roads. You know, there's different kinds, so you can probably guess, but it's better if someone tells you. All right, so with so we're going to tell it to use a class code. Right now, we're just going to let it be random colors, but we'll work on that in a minute. And then I'm going to click classify. You never want to do this on continuous data because, in fact, it might not let you do it because if you have continuous numbers, it's just going to take forever. But I know that there's a limited number of options here. In fact, we have 7 because we have 0 through 6 of different kinds of streets. Okay, well, we could probably guess if we're looking at this. On my screen, there's a lot of blue. So I would guess whatever blue is probably going to be residential, right? And then some of these other ones that stick out as different colors, like the one that crosses the bay is probably a highway or freeway or some other similar classification. So I can make some guesses, but I also have the data dictionary for this particular data set. And in your online notes, there's also the table that tells you what each of these are. So let's make some choices on here. So in the legend, I'm just gonna double click where it says legend on my 0, and it's actually going to let me type in there. I know it's probably hard to see on the screen because it's highlighted both, but I'm going to put, instead of 0, I'm going to tell it to be called private streets. So you can actually type in that box, and then you'll see over here on the side, instead of saying 0 in the layers panel, it actually says private streets now, which is also going to put that information. If you made a legend in a map, it will put that. So your reader doesn't have to be like, what the heck does 0 mean? 0 street? That makes no sense. You can actually put the words, even though it's still coded in the data set. If I look at the attribute table, it still says 0, but this makes it more readable for the human person that's going to look at this. And so 1 is not actually a 1 in our understanding. It's actually a freeway. So I'm going to call 1 freeways. And again, these are also in the online notes, so you can find that table too if you need to refer to that. Or you can call them whatever you like, to be honest. With the workshop, no one will know. So if you want to call them Bob and Fred and Jill, that's okay too. So number 2 is going to be highways. I'm sure a transportation person can tell us what the exact definition of those 2 are. For cartography, I might combine them. Let's see, 3 is major streets. Then 4 is secondary streets. So secondary streets are kind of like intermediate things. And then 5 is called local streets. Again, this is where you would need their transportation people to really tell you what the difference is between those. If there's any transportation folks in the room who can shed light on that, that's good. And then 6 is freeway ramps. Now, if I'm doing cartography, I would make a choice whether I styled freeway ramps the same as the things around it or the same as freeways. I probably would not make them their own thing, but just for these purposes, we can show it this way. Okay, so now at least we have our names up there. Yeah, question. You could do it either way. It depends on if it was something I needed to reproduce, like say over multiple maps, I would probably make a new category in the attribute table so I didn't have to do this every time. But if it's a one-off thing, I might just do it here in the styling instead. So you do have options. The fun thing with GIS is there's usually 100 ways to do anything. You just get to decide which one works best for you at the given time. Yeah, so that's a great question. Okay, so now we've got names in here. That's more usable. But I don't know about these colors. Anyone else have colors that you're like, nah, I probably wouldn't put this on an official map of anything, right? Because it's just pick defaults, right? It doesn't have any idea of what we're dealing with in terms of data. So what I'm going to do is instead, I can actually change the symbol. So I'm going to start with 0, and I'm going to click on the symbol next to it, which I believe is, okay, yes, it's a blue line. Again, this looks like when we styled it, we just made them all gray, right? So I'm dealing with one line at a time. I'm going to click on simple line. And then for my color, I'm actually going to keep, click on the color box instead. And I'm going to pick my gray that we picked before, but I'm going to change the weight of it. So I've got my dark gray. I'm going to click back. And then for my stroke width, lines are referred to as, in terms of the art world, a line is a stroke. It's like a brush stroke, right? How wide my stroke is how fat the line is. So in this case, I'm going to decide, okay, I like the default on this one according to my notes. So I'm going to leave it as 0.26 millimeters for this purpose, and that's fine. So now that I have the color's gray and the stroke width is 0.26, that's good. So I'm going to go back. And now I'm going to look at the symbology for my ones. Same deal, double click on it, pick simple line. Again, all of them are going to be the same color gray, but I'm going to vary the width. And then for this particular one, I'm going to make it 2.0 millimeters. So, whoa, that's fat. But that's because these are freeways and highways, right? So I want to have them large because they're special kinds of streets. And again, all the width notes are further down in the notes. So there's a table that shows you what width I've chosen. Feel free to vary it, as you see fit. So I've clicked on my number 3s. Again, I'm going to pick gray. And then I'm going to tell it, because these are highways and the other one was freeways, I'm going to actually style them the same way, because in terms of where I drive, I feel like they're pretty similar. So they'll all be the same. Then for major streets, double clicking, simple line. So this will be kind of repetitive, and that's okay because then you will remember it. And then for these ones, the width is going to be 1. And then for number 4s, these are also going to be gray because they're streets. And I'm also going to leave the default on this one to 0.26 because these are small streets. So we're going to give them a small line. And then for local streets, number 5, again, I'm just going to keep the same line width, the default, and I'm going to color them gray. Because again, these are little streets, so I'm going to make little lines. And then finally for number 6s, the freeway ramps, again, it's going to be gray, but I'm going to make it 0.5. So they're a little bit bigger, but they're not quite as big as the freeways. So 0.5. Okay, this looks more like streets, right? Like how you would visualize them rather than having party streamer colors. I like this better, but then again, I also chose this. But you could also play with this. Not the only answer, I guess is what I want to say. You can decide what you think is best for your particular cartographic adventure. Sometimes I'll actually drop out some of these. Like I could decide like, maybe I don't want to see local streets at all. I can just uncheck them. And now I've simplified it a little bit. You know, depending on what scale I'm printing this at, that might be the right answer. So anyway, you have options, and you should, you know, make choices based on what's going to communicate best for your data. All right, I just thought I should save, so I'm going to save. You should all save too if you haven't saved, because that was a lot of work. So don't do one more thing, just save. Okay, so hey, look at what we've done so far. We've got roads, we've done some elevations. We can actually turn on our DEM. We've got roads on top of a digital elevation model. Hey, look, might have some explanation why some of these are so squiggly now, right? Because they're on a hillside. Cool, right? All that comes together because it's all spatial. All right, so in the little bit of time we have left, let's see. Let's make a map with the print composer. How about that? Does that sound like a plan? So a lot of the other, there's more about different kinds of data, points, lines, and polygons in the workshop materials that we're not going to have time to get to, which I didn't think we would. This is actually planned as a 4-hour workshop. So there's a lot more that, you know, you can work through on your own, and you can also come to drop-in hours to get help. But let's look at how you make an actual map so that you can, you know, put this in a report, or put it in your dissertation, or put it in your grant proposal. So the way you do that in QGIS is you go to the project menu, and then you pick new print layout. So once I pick new print layout, it wants to know, what do I want to call this print layout? Because I could have multiple print layouts. In fact, when I'm like working on cartography for books for people, a lot of times it will be the same data set that we visualize in different ways. So I don't need a new project for every visualization that I'm, you know, zooming in different ways. I can just have a new layout. So I'm just going to call this one workshop, because that way I will remember. And now my computer is saying, not right now, but you all can name it whatever you like. When you're done, you're going to click OK, and then it will open up the print composer at that point. So again, I got here by going to the project menu and then clicking on new print composer. Maybe the Jeopardy hold music. It also says that it will make a title automatically if you leave it empty. It will do something like map 1. And if you were to come back to this, like if this was a project you were working on for real, you're not going to remember what map 1 was. Give it a name, give it a real name, so you don't have to like worry about it. All right, so I'm calling mine workshop. And I'm going to click OK. So you all probably have gotten to this point already. So you've got a blank screen, which looks confusing, right? Like, where's my map? We're going to add every piece of this that we want. So the first thing I'm going to do is right-click on anywhere on my white page area. And I'm going to do this so I can get to the page properties. So once I have that menu, so I just right-clicked to get that, and I'm going to click on page properties. The default page size is A4, which is not the same as letter. So pick whatever size you like. I'm going to pick letter for right now, but I'll also point out that you can make your own custom sizes, which is really nice if you're making a figure that's going into like a publication. And you know, the publisher, if you haven't seen this, publishers have specs for how big things can be. A book will say if your page size is 9 by 5 inch or 9 by 6 inch page, you get 5 by 5 inches max. So you're like, okay, I'm going to come into the print composer and set my page size right then and there so that I know what my constraints are. For this, we're just making, you know, a practice map. You can make it however big you want, but there are ways that you can work with this professionally. So first thing I want to do is I want to add a map. So one of these tools, I always forget which icon is which, adds a map. So it kind of looks like a little like rolled out piece of paper for the icon. You can also, I think, get to it with, yes, add items. You can click add map from here. I'm going to click on that. And then anywhere in the box you like, we can adjust the size later. I'm going to click and drag. And as I drag my mouse, it's going to make a box. And again, I'm not going to worry too much about the size because I can always resize it later. And then when I release it, it says rendering map. And it put what's on my underlying screen, which is pretty cool. One of the things though is I'm not particularly thrilled with the zoom level. So in the item properties, I can play with the zoom. So I can say like, okay, 1 to 48,000. Maybe I want to try 1 to 45,000 and see what that does. Okay, that zoomed in a little bit more. So I'm going to clean up the numbers and just do around 45,000 and hit enter, and then it will resume. Maybe 43. This is a normal process to go through to kind of play with the numbers until you get what you like. All right, so that looks pretty good for the zoom. I can reposition it. So if, let's say, I'm not happy with how it's centered, I can use the move item content and kind of drag it so that the city kind of goes off the screen so I don't have that hard edge. So I can play with that. I can also do things like add a title. There's a button to add a new label to the layout, which I can use to add a title. So I can make a box, and that puts the text box. So I can say, in the main properties, I can change the name there, and I can say City of San Francisco. And then scrolling down, you have options for the font. So I can say, that's really small. Let's make it much larger. So I'm going to pick 48. And then I can drag it and put it. Oops, come back. There we go. So you can play with that. You can change the font size. You can change the color. You can change the actual font. Like, I think the default is like whatever system font is there, but usually pick something else. You can even use fonts that you've downloaded from other places. You can actually add a legend if you want. There's a legend button. There's scale bars, things like that. You can add north arrows. So that's the overview, the really quick intro to GIS and QGIS in, you know, an hour and 45 minutes, really, when we get down to it. Today, you've learned some of the basics, right? This is not the full GIS. That's what, you know, classes and map time and home study kind of stuff is for, to get more details into this. But we've just skimmed the surface. You learned how to style a raster. You learned how to style one vector data set, and then we made a really rough map in the span of an hour and 45 minutes. So what I would encourage you to do is, if this is new and it's interesting and you're like, but that wasn't enough, Michelle, I need more GIS, keep learning. Like, this is something, you can make an entire career out of this. Like, I've been doing GIS since like 2002. I started with ARC 3.2. If you're following along with the ARC numbers, you're like, whoa, she's old. And that's okay. I've been doing this for a while. You can use this in a lot of different fields. There's applications in pretty much any field you can think of. Come talk to me if you think you've figured out one where you can't use GIS, and I will hopefully have an answer. I will look one up for you. But you can use this in pretty much any field. So it's something that is really useful, and you can make money doing this. It's a good tool to be able to just use. You will become the GIS person for your friend group, perhaps, and you will make all of their figures for their dissertations for where their study site locations are. And that's a good thing to have too. So anyway, I hope that you've learned something that you feel is useful. Later today, you will get an email with a link for a feedback form that's online. Please fill that out online. This year, we're trying to go paperless. And so far, so good, but I want to let you know that that is valuable feedback for us, and it would be much better if you do it online, so next year I don't have to print a bunch of print things and do data entry by hand. It will be better if you enter it so that you do it correctly the way you want it. So just look for that. So I wanted to say thank you, and please feel free to come ask me questions. I'll be hanging around for the next 5 minutes or so. There are materials over there on the side, and that's what we've got today. So go do something fun.